Get out of here now. People like you do not belong in this place. Stand up immediately and let my VIP guests sit down.
Ethan Cole grabbed the woman by the arm so hard that her coffee splashed across the cream leather seat. The cabin went silent. Every head inside the private jet turned at once.
You need to move.
Now, Ethan said. His voice carried the sharp edge of a man used to being obeyed. The woman looked down at the coffee dripping from her sleeve, then slowly back up at him. She did not fight him. She did not raise her voice. That was the part Ethan would remember later. 'Cause people who truly held power rarely needed to prove it. The engines of the Gulf Stream hummed low outside the cabin windows as rain tapped softly against the runway at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. Most passengers had already boarded. Expensive perfume floated through the aisle. Crystal glasses clinked softly in polished holders. The aircraft smelled like old money, and Ethan believed he understood exactly who belonged there. The woman did not fit the picture. She sat alone in seat 2A wearing a faded gray hoodie, dark jeans, and white sneakers worn thin around the soles. No jewelry, no designer luggage, no assistant. Her natural curls were tied back loosely beneath a baseball cap. To Ethan, she looked tired, not wealthy, and in his world, those were not the same thing. "I'm speaking to you," he said colder this time. The woman blinked once. "I heard you." Her voice was calm, deep, controlled. That irritated him even more. Across the aisle, a silver-haired man lowered his newspaper. A younger couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nobody spoke. Nobody ever spoke in moments like this, because wealth trained people to stay quiet when authority entered the room. Ethan straightened his pilot jacket. "This cabin is reserved for executive clients," he said. "There's been a seating mistake." The woman looked toward the boarding pass still resting beside her untouched coffee. "No," she replied quietly, "there hasn't." Ethan's jaw tightened. For 25 years, he had flown politicians, celebrities, hedge fund billionaires, and corporate founders across the country. He knew how rich people acted. He knew how they dressed, how they carried themselves. This woman was not one of them. At least that was what he told himself. Near the entrance stairs, Ryan Mitchell stood frozen beside the cabin door, pretending to review the passenger list on his tablet. 31 years old, former Air Force, 2 years under Ethan's command. Ryan felt the tension immediately. He also noticed something Ethan either missed or ignored. The woman never looked nervous.
Not once.
"You're delaying departure," Ethan said. "Please cooperate." The woman slowly folded her hands in her lap. "What happens if I don't?" A few passengers shifted in their seats. That question changed the air inside the cabin. Ethan took one slow breath through his nose. Outside, lightning flashed beyond the runway. Then airport security escorts you off the aircraft. The woman stared at him for several seconds, not angry, not afraid, studying him like she already knew exactly who he was, and that unsettled him in ways he could not explain. Before Ethan could speak again, footsteps clicked sharply up the boarding stairs. Vanessa Sinclair entered the cabin carrying a white cashmere coat over one arm and a phone pressed against her ear. She stopped mid-sentence the moment she saw the woman sitting in 2A. Her expression changed instantly. "Oh, come on," she muttered. Vanessa lowered her phone slowly. Ethan moved toward her at once, relief washing through him. Vanessa's father owned one of the largest media groups on the East Coast. She flew Skyline Air Private almost every month. Important clients mattered, especially now. "There seems to be a situation," Ethan told her quietly. Vanessa gave the seated woman one long look. Then she leaned closer to Ethan. "She's staying here?" Her tone carried disgust disguised as confusion. Ethan lowered his voice further. "I'm handling it." Vanessa laughed softly under her breath. "Well, handle it faster." The woman in the hoodie heard every word. Still, she remained perfectly still. Ryan watched her eyes carefully now. No embarrassment, no panic, only patience. That scared him more than shouting would have. Ethan turned back toward her. "Mom, I'm asking you one final time." The woman tilted her head slightly. "When you look at me," she asked quietly, "what exactly do you see?" The question caught him off guard. Ethan frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said, "you made a decision about me before speaking to me. I'm wondering what you based it on." Nobody moved. Even Vanessa stopped checking her phone. Ethan felt heat rise beneath his collar. "This isn't personal." The woman nodded slowly. That's usually what people say right before they do something personal. Ryan looked down at the floor because deep down, he knew she was right. Ethan's voice hardened. You don't fit the security profile for executive passengers aboard this aircraft. The moment the words left his mouth, the cabin changed. A heavy silence settled across the leather seats. The older man with the newspaper slowly lowered it completely now. Vanessa crossed her arms. And the woman in seat 2A finally leaned back. There it was, the truth hiding beneath Ethan's professionalism. Not policy, not procedure, judgment, clean, instant, dangerous. The woman reached for her coffee-stained sleeve and wiped it carefully with a napkin. Then she looked Ethan directly in the eyes. You know, she said softly, people always reveal themselves when they think they're protecting power. Ethan stared at her. For the first time since boarding began, uncertainty flickered through him. Very small, very brief, but real. Then Ryan's tablet vibrated violently in his hands. He glanced down, and his face drained of color. The message came directly from Skyline Air Executive Headquarters. Priority urgent. Ryan looked from the screen, dot to the woman, then back to Ethan. His throat tightened. Because the woman sitting quietly in seat 2A was not a passenger. She was Naomi Brooks. And 3 days earlier, she had purchased controlling ownership of Skyline Air for $4.8 billion. Ryan's hands started shaking before he even looked up from the tablet. The rain outside hit harder now, sharp against the aircraft windows. The engines continued their low, steady growl beneath the silence building inside the cabin. Ethan noticed Ryan's face immediately. What is it? He asked. Ryan swallowed. His mouth had gone dry. The message on the screen was short, brutally clear. Executive ownership transfer confirmed. Naomi Brooks now holds controlling interest in Skyline Air. All senior staff report directly effective immediately. Ryan looked toward Naomi again. She sat exactly the same way, calm, composed, one hand resting lightly near the stained coffee napkin, like she had seen moments like this her entire life. Ethan took one step closer to Ryan. What are you staring at? Ryan lowered his voice. Captain.
I think we need to stop.
Ethan frowned harder.
Stop what?
Ryan glanced toward Naomi, then back at him. This. The word landed like a crack in the cabin. Vanessa looked between them impatiently.
What is going on?
Nobody answered her. Ryan finally turned the tablet around. Ethan scanned the message once, then again. The color drained slowly from his face. His shoulders stiffened first, then his jaw. For a few seconds, he looked like a man trying to read another language. That's impossible, he muttered. Naomi watched him quietly. No, she said softly. It isn't. The older passenger across the aisle lowered his glasses completely now. The young couple near the rear seats exchanged another nervous look. The entire atmosphere inside the jet changed shape. Power had moved, and everyone could feel it. Vanessa let out a short laugh. Wait, you're telling me she owns Skyline? Ryan answered carefully. Yes, Mom. Vanessa stared at Naomi again. Longer this time, not with disgust anymore, with calculation. People change fast around money, faster around power. Ethan stepped backward slowly. His breathing had changed. Shorter now, less controlled. Naomi finally stood. Not dramatically, not angrily, just slowly. And somehow that made it worse. She picked up her boarding pass from the seat beside her and folded it neatly. I bought this company because I believed it could become better than what it is, she said. Tonight has been very educational. Ethan opened his mouth. Miss Brooks, No, she interrupted calmly. Do not rush to apologize just because you finally know my name. That hit harder than shouting would have. Ryan looked down again, because deep inside, he knew she was not talking only to Ethan. She was talking to everyone who stayed quiet when humiliation became acceptable. Outside the cabin, baggage handlers moved through the rain beneath glowing runway lights. The storm blurred the airport into silver and black streaks. Inside the aircraft, nobody moved. Naomi turned toward Vanessa. You asked if I belonged here. Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. I didn't know who you were. Naomi nodded once. That's the point. Vanessa looked away first, not because she felt guilt yet, because she suddenly felt exposed. Naomi had stripped away the comfortable illusion both of them lived inside. The illusion that wealth could always recognize itself on sight. But real power rarely looked the way people expected. Sometimes it wore hoodies, sometimes exhaustion, Silence. Naomi walked slowly toward the front galley. Ethan instinctively stepped aside to let her pass. A few minutes earlier, he had physically grabbed her arm. Now he would not even risk brushing against her sleeve. Ryan noticed that too, and it made his stomach turn. Because fear had replaced disrespect so quickly. That was America sometimes. Cruel before status, polite after confirmation. Naomi stopped near the cockpit door. She looked at the frame company slogan mounted beside it. Excellence above all. A faint smile crossed her face, not amused.
Disappointed.
My mother cleaned airplanes for 18 years, she said quietly. Nobody expected the sentence. The cabin remained frozen. She worked overnight shifts at Logan Airport in Boston, sometimes 3 jobs at once. Naomi's eyes stayed fixed on the company slogan. Men like you walk past her every night without seeing her. Ethan lowered his gaze. She used to tell me something, Naomi continued. You can learn everything about a person by watching how they treat people they think cannot hurt them. The words settled deep inside the cabin, heavy, personal. Ryan felt something tighten in his chest because Ethan had taught him flying procedures, discipline, professionalism, but not humanity. And Ryan suddenly realized those were different things. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Well, misunderstandings happen. Naomi turned toward her slowly. No, choices happen. Vanessa had no response this time. Ethan finally forced himself to speak again. Miss Brooks, I made an incorrect judgment. Naomi looked directly at him. You made several. The engine noise seemed louder now. Or maybe silence had sharpened everyone's hearing. Ethan straightened slightly, trying to recover some authority. With respect, security assessments are part of aviation protocol. Naomi stepped closer, so is dignity. Neither looked away. Ethan felt sweat gathering beneath his collar despite the cool cabin air. For the first time in years, he could not control the room. And what frightened him most was not losing his position. It was realizing how many times he may have done this before without consequence. Faces began returning to him suddenly. Passengers questioned more aggressively than others. Travelers he assumed did not belong. People he spoke down to. At the time, it always felt reasonable, professional, necessary. Now those memories looked different. Ryan saw it happening in real time across Ethan's face, the slow collapse of certainty. Naomi glanced toward the rear of the aircraft where a flight attendant stood frozen near the beverage station. Her name was Claire Benson, 56 years old, widowed, working private aviation for nearly 3 decades. Claire had watched everything and done nothing. Naomi met her eyes gently.
What were you thinking when he grabbed me?
Claire's lips parted slightly. She hesitated, then answered honestly. I thought you looked tired. Naomi nodded. I was. Claire's eyes began watering unexpectedly, because she suddenly realized how dangerous exhaustion could look on the wrong person. Naomi walked back towards seat 2A and picked up her coffee cup again. Cold now, untouched. I'm not interested in revenge, she said quietly. I'm interested in truth. Nobody spoke. You believed I did not belong in this cabin because I did not match your idea of importance. Her eyes moved slowly across Ethan, Vanessa, and the others. That mindset destroys companies long before bad business decisions do. Outside, thunder rolled across the runway, deep, distant. Inside the jet, the truth sat heavier than the storm itself. And for the first time in his career, Ethan Cole felt genuinely ashamed to wear the uniform on his back. The storm delayed departure by almost 40 minutes. Nobody complained anymore, not after what had just happened. The private jet sat motionless beneath sheets of cold rain while runway lights reflected across the wet tarmac like broken glass. Inside the cabin, the air had grown heavier, thicker. People avoided eye contact now, especially Ethan. He remained standing near the cockpit entrance with both hands locked behind his back, trying to regain control of his breathing. But every few seconds, his eyes drifted toward Naomi, and every time they did, shame hit harder. Not because she owned the company, because she had been right. Ryan stayed near the galley, pretending to review weather updates. In truth, he could not stop replaying the moment Ethan grabbed her arm, the sound, the silence after, the way nobody moved to help. That part bothered him most. Claire quietly collected the stained napkins from Naomi's seat. Her movements were slower now, careful, like she suddenly understood the cabin had become something more than a flight. It had become a mirror. Naomi sat by the window, watching rain slide across the glass in thin silver lines. Manhattan's skyline glowed faintly in the distance through the storm clouds. Her phone buzzed again. Board members, attorneys, press inquiries. She ignored them all, because the problem sitting inside this aircraft was larger than public relations. It was culture. Vanessa finally broke the silence. "So what happens now?" she asked. Nobody answered immediately. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably beneath the weight of the quiet. She was not used to silence. Wealth usually protected her from it, filled it with attention, agreement, service, but not tonight. Naomi turned slowly from the window.
What do you think should happen?
Vanessa blinked. The question caught her off guard. She crossed her arms again. Obviously, this whole thing got out of hand. Naomi studied her carefully. No, it revealed itself. Vanessa looked away. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The words cut because they were precise. Outside, thunder rolled again, lower this time, closer. Ryan finally stepped forward, holding the tablet tightly against his chest. "Mom," he said carefully, "operations wants to know if we should continue to Chicago tonight." Naomi looked at him. Unlike Ethan, Ryan still looked human to her, nervous, imperfect, teachable. "What do you think?" she asked. Ryan hesitated. He swallowed. "I think the crew should probably be evaluated before flying executive passengers." Ethan's head turned sharply toward him. Not anger, shock. Ryan almost never challenged him publicly. But something had shifted inside the younger pilot tonight. Years of silent observation were beginning to surface. Naomi noticed immediately. "Why would you say that?" she asked softly. Ryan glanced at Ethan before answering. "Because good pilots are supposed to make people feel safe." His voice lowered, not small. The cabin fell silent again. Claire stopped moving entirely near the beverage station. Vanessa stared at Ryan with surprise. Ethan looked like he had been slapped. Not because Ryan insulted him. Because deep down, Ethan knew the kid was right. For years, he believed professionalism meant control, order, standards. But somewhere along the way, he had confused dignity with status. And now another man was saying it out loud in front of everyone. Naomi nodded slowly. "What made you stay quiet earlier?" Ryan's face tightened. The question hit deeper than he expected. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because he's my captain." Ethan lowered his eyes. Ryan continued more quietly now. "And maybe because people get used to things." He looked around the cabin. "You see behavior enough times. Eventually, it starts feeling normal." Nobody interrupted him because everyone on board recognized the truth in that sentence. Claire finally spoke from the back.
"He's right."
Her voice trembled slightly. "I've seen passengers embarrassed before." She looked at Ethan sadly. "I just told myself it was part of the job." Ethan's chest tightened. Claire had worked beside him for 11 years. 11 years. And she sounded disappointed in him. That hurt more than Naomi's authority ever could. Naomi leaned back slowly in her seat. "This company doesn't have a training problem," she said. "It has a human problem." The rain softened outside. Only the engines remained now, low and steady beneath the silence. Vanessa uncrossed her arms at last. "My father always said private aviation is about exclusivity." Naomi nodded once.
"It is."
Vanessa looked confused. Naomi continued. "But exclusivity without humanity becomes arrogance." Her eyes sharpened slightly. "And arrogance destroys business faster than incompetence." Vanessa said nothing after that, because for the first time in her life, someone had spoken to her without trying to impress her.
"And strangely enough."
She respected it. A notification suddenly lit up across Ryan's tablet screen again. Media alert. Someone inside the terminal had already leaked photos from the aircraft. One image showed Ethan gripping Naomi's arm near seat A. Ryan's stomach dropped. The story was spreading fast. He looked toward Naomi carefully. "Mom, this is online now." Naomi held out her hand for the tablet. Ryan passed it over. The article headline flashed across the screen. "Private jet owner mistaken for unauthorized passenger on her own aircraft." Below it, comments were multiplying by the second. Some angry, some mocking, some painfully familiar. Naomi read silently for a moment before handing the tablet back. No visible emotion. But inside, old wounds had reopened, because this was not new to her. Boardrooms, hotels, airports, luxury stores, different cities, same look. the quiet suspicion that she had entered a space was not for someone who looked like her. Ethan watched her carefully now, and for the first time all evening, he stopped seeing a billionaire. He saw a tired woman carrying years of invisible battles nobody else in the cabin had noticed. That realization hit him harder than losing his job ever could. Naomi stood slowly. "I want a full review of passenger treatment reports over the last 10 years, she said calmly. "Every complaint, every settlement, every internal investigation." Ryan nodded immediately. Ethan spoke before thinking. "That could damage the company." Naomi looked directly at him. "No," she replied quietly. "The behavior damaged the company. The truth only exposes it." The words landed with brutal clarity. No shouting, no theatrics, just truth. And truth, Ethan realized, was far more difficult to escape. The aircraft finally lifted off just after midnight. Rain streaked across the windows as the Gulf Stream climbed above the storm clouds and into a sky black as wet ink. Manhattan disappeared beneath them. Just scattered lights now, tiny, distant. Inside the cab, nobody relaxed, not even the passengers. The earlier tension had settled into something quieter, more dangerous, self-awareness. Ethan sat alone in the jump seat behind the cockpit instead of taking his usual command posture near the cabin entrance. His pilot jacket suddenly felt heavier on his shoulders, tight around the neck. For years, that uniform made him feel respected. Tonight, it felt like evidence. Ryan handled most of the communication with air traffic control, while Ethan remained unusually silent. The younger pilot noticed it immediately. No corrections, no lectures, no sharp instructions, just silence. That scared Ryan more than anger would have. Behind them, Naomi sat near the window reading internal company reports on her tablet. The cabin lights were dimmed low now, soft amber against dark leather seats. Claire quietly placed a fresh cup of coffee beside her. "This one's hot," Claire said gently. Naomi looked up. "Thank you." Claire hesitated before stepping away, then stopped herself. "I should have said something earlier." Naomi studied her face carefully. Claire looked exhausted, older than she had an hour ago. "You were trying to keep your job," Naomi replied softly. Claire shook her head. "No." Her eyes lowered. "I was trying to stay comfortable." That answer mattered, because honesty was beginning to spread through the aircraft now. Painful honesty, the kind most people avoid their entire lives. Naomi gave her a small nod. That's usually how systems survive. Claire swallowed hard and returned slowly toward the galley. Across the aisle, Vanessa stared blankly at her untouched champagne glass. The arrogance that once filled her posture had faded into something uncertain. She kept replaying her own words in her head. People like that. She had said it so casually, so naturally, as if human beings could be sorted into categories at a glance. Vanessa suddenly remembered being 19 years old at a charity dinner with her father. A hotel employee had mistaken her Latina friend for kitchen staff because of her last name and darker skin. Everyone laughed awkwardly. Nobody corrected it, Vanessa included. At the time, she told herself it was harmless. Now she wondered how many moments like that built the world she lived inside. Naomi noticed Vanessa staring at the floor. "You're thinking about something." Vanessa looked up slowly. "My father always told me wealthy people have instincts." She forced a weak smile. "I think maybe we just have habits." Naomi nodded once.
That's closer to the truth.
Vanessa looked toward Ethan near the cockpit.
Do you think people really change?
The question lingered in the soft engine noise. Naomi answered carefully. "Sometimes." She glanced out the window, but only after something breaks. In the cockpit, Ryan reviewed the latest media reports quietly. The story had exploded online. Cable news stations picked it up first, then aviation blogs, then national media. Passenger removed from seat by private jet captain before being revealed as airline owner. The comments beneath the articles became a war zone. Some defended Ethan, some attacked him. Others shared stories of their own. People describing being followed in luxury stores, questioned in first-class cabins, treated differently in spaces designed for wealth. Ryan kept reading. And with every new story, his chest tightened more, because he realized this was not one bad night. It was a pattern. Ethan suddenly spoke without turning around. "How bad is it?" Ryan hesitated. "Pretty bad." Ethan nodded once. He did not ask to see the screen. Part of him already knew. Outside the cockpit windshield, lightning flickered deep within distant clouds. Brief flashes of white across endless darkness. Ethan stared ahead at the night sky. For the first time in decades, he was afraid of landing. Not because of the press, not because of the board, because eventually he would have to face himself without excuses, and he was no longer sure he liked the man waiting there. Back in the cabin, Naomi opened another file from the company archive. Passenger complaints, internal reviews, confidential settlements. She stopped at one report from 6 years earlier. African-American physician questioned repeatedly during boarding despite presenting valid credentials. Another. Military veteran asked to leave executive lounge because staff assumed membership fraud. Another. Woman wearing work uniform denied service until husband arrived. Naomi closed the tablet slowly. The pattern was older than Ethan, older than Skyline Air. It lived inside institutions all across the country, quiet, polished, hidden beneath customer service smiles and corporate language. That was what disturbed her most. Not cruelty, normalcy. Claire approached again softly. We'll be landing in Chicago in about an hour. Naomi nodded. Thank you. Claire lingered this time. My son is a police officer in Baltimore, she said quietly, a good man, but lately. He keeps telling me the hardest part of the job is in danger. She paused.
It's becoming numb.
Naomi listened carefully. Claire continued. He says once people stop seeing humanity in strangers, everything else gets easier. The words settled deep into the cabin. Vanessa looked away again. Ryan heard them from the cockpit. Even Ethan's shoulders shifted slightly, because everybody on board understood exactly what she meant. The danger was never hatred alone. It was repetition. Enough repetition and cruelty became routine. Judgment became policy. Humiliation became procedure. Naomi finally spoke. That's why accountability matters. Claire nodded slowly. Not punishment, not revenge. Accountability. A word America often confused with attack. But Naomi understood something most powerful people did not. Real accountability was not destruction. It was confrontation, reflection, choice. The aircraft hit light turbulence suddenly. The cabin shook once. Sharp. Brief. Vanessa grabbed the armrest instinctively. Ryan's calm voice came over the intercom moments later. Nothing serious, folks. Just a rough patch. Naomi almost smiled at the timing. A rough patch. That described far more than the weather tonight. Ethan finally stood from the jump seat and stepped slowly into the cabin again. Nobody spoke as he approached Naomi. The sound of his shoes against the carpet seemed louder than before. He stopped beside seat 2A. For a moment, he looked like he might return to the confident captain he had always been. But he didn't. His voice came out quieter, smaller. My mother grew up poor in Oklahoma, he said suddenly. Naomi looked up at him. Ethan kept staring ahead instead of meeting her eyes. She used to iron rich people's clothes for extra money. His jaw tightened. She always told me if I worked hard enough, maybe one day nobody could look down on me again. The cabin stayed completely still. Ethan finally looked at Naomi, and somewhere along the way, his voice cracked slightly. I became the person she warned me about. Naomi did not answer right away. She let Ethan's words sit between them. The cabin lights hummed softly overhead. The jet moved through the night with that smooth, expensive silence only private aircraft seemed to have. Below them, America was hidden beneath clouds. Cities, highways, farms, small houses with porch lights burning in the dark. All those lives, all those people, all those quiet judgments happening every day. Naomi looked at Ethan for a long moment. That may be the first honest thing you've said tonight, she said. Ethan swallowed. It was not forgiveness. He knew that. But it was something worse in a way. It was an opening, and openings demanded courage. Vanessa sat completely still, her champagne forgotten beside her. Claire stood near the galley, with one hand pressed lightly against the counter. Ryan watched from the cockpit doorway, pretending not to listen, but hearing every word. Ethan lowered himself into the seat across from Naomi without being invited, then caught himself.
May I sit?
Naomi's eyes held his. You may ask. The correction was gentle, but it landed. Ethan nodded slowly.
May I sit? Yes.
He sat down carefully, like the seat might reject him. For years, he had occupied every cabin like it was his territory. Tonight, he understood how different a space felt when permission mattered. His hands rested on his knees. I don't know how to fix what I did, he said. Naomi looked down at the coffee stain still faintly visible on her sleeve. You start by not trying to fix it too quickly. Ethan frowned, confused. People rush to repair damage because they want relief, she continued. They want the shame to stop. They want the person they hurt to make them feel decent again. Her voice stayed even. Not soft, not cruel, steady. But the first responsibility after harm is not relief. It is recognition. Ethan breathed in slowly. Recognition. The word felt heavier than apology. He looked toward Vanessa. She quickly dropped her eyes, then toward Claire. Claire did not look away. That hurt, because Claire had seen him clearly for years, maybe clearer than he had seen himself. Naomi picked up her tablet and tapped the screen. A document opened. Passenger conduct complaints. Ethan recognized the Skyline Air logo at the top. His stomach tightened. I reviewed these before the flight, Naomi said. Ethan looked up sharply. You already knew? I knew there were problems. I didn't know you would demonstrate them personally before sunrise. Ryan flinched at the line. Vanessa's lips parted slightly. Ethan felt the blood leave his face. Naomi turned the tablet toward him. 11 complaints mention your name. The cabin seemed to shrink. Ethan stared at the screen. 11. Not one misunderstanding. Not 2 difficult passengers. 11. His mouth went dry. I was never disciplined. I know. They were reviewed. They were dismissed. He looked at her. Naomi's gaze did not move. Those are not the same thing. The words struck hard because they were clean and true. Ethan scanned the first complaint. A black attorney questioned repeatedly before boarding, despite verified identity. Another, an elderly Latino business owner told his attire was not appropriate for executive cabin standards. Another, a Native American woman asked whether she was part of the catering staff. Ethan stopped reading, his throat closed, faces stirred in the back of his mind, brief, blurry, conveniently forgotten. He had filed each moment away as operational judgment. Now they looked like wounds. Naomi's voice dropped lower. How many of them do you remember? Ethan's answer came out barely above a whisper.
Some.
Why not all? He stared down at the tablet. Because they had not mattered to him. That was the truth. He did not say it yet, but Naomi saw it. So did Ryan. So did Claire. And maybe that was the punishment. Not being exposed by someone else, but finally being unable to lie to yourself. Vanessa shifted in her seat.
Were there complaints about me?
Naomi turned toward her. Vanessa looked defensive, but not arrogant now. Smaller, younger. Not formal complaints, Naomi said, but your family's account has notes. Vanessa stiffened.
What kind of notes?
Naomi glanced at the tablet. Requests to remove staff members who spoke with accents. Complaints about drivers not being polished enough. Preference for crews who matched brand expectations. Vanessa's face flushed. That was my father, sometimes, Naomi said. Vanessa looked wounded by the accuracy, then ashamed by the wound. Because the truth was, she had benefited from those preferences without asking who paid the price. The aircraft began a slow descent. Ryan's voice came over the speaker, steady but tight. We've begun our approach into Chicago. Weather is clear. We should be on the ground shortly. Chicago. The word changed the cabin again. Landing meant lights, phones, executives, consequences. Ethan stared at the dark window and saw his reflection in it, older, paler, stripped. Naomi took the tablet back. When we land, operations will be waiting, she said. So will legal.
So will 2 members of the board.
Ethan nodded stiffly. Am I being fired? Everyone waited for the answer, even Vanessa. Naomi looked at him for a long time. That depends. Ethan's brow tightened.
On what?
On whether you want to protect your reputation or confront your character.
The sentence cut through him.
Simple, sharp, final. Ethan looked down at his hands. The same hands that had gripped Naomi's arm. For the first time, he imagined how that moment felt to her. Not as an incident, not as a complaint, as a human being. A woman sitting where she belonged. A stranger touching her without permission. A uniform turning prejudice into force. His fingers curled inward. I don't deserve another chance, he said. Naomi did not soften. Maybe not. Claire inhaled quietly. Ethan accepted the blow. Naomi continued. But deserving is not the only question. Usefulness matters too. Ethan looked up. If I fire you tonight, people will call it justice for a few days. Then they will move on. The company will issue a statement. Executives will attend training. Everyone will learn to hide the problem better. Ryan stepped fully into the cabin now. Naomi's eyes moved to him, then back to Ethan. But if you are willing to stand inside the damage you helped create and tell the truth about it, you may be useful. Ethan's voice cracked. To whom? To the people who are still making the same mistake and calling it professionalism. The jet dipped through a thin layer of cloud. Chicago appeared below, a field of lights stretching to the horizon. Beautiful, indifferent. Ethan pressed his palms against his knees. What would I have to do? Naomi's answer came without hesitation. Everything you have avoided. The landing gear lowered with a deep mechanical thud. Vanessa closed her eyes. Claire gripped the galley rail. Ryan returned to the cockpit. Ethan stayed frozen across from Naomi. The runway lights rose toward them in perfect white lines. Naomi leaned slightly forward. When that door opens, she said, you will have a choice. You can walk out as a man trying to save himself. Or you can walk out as a man ready to tell the truth. The wheels hit the runway, hard. The cabin jolted. No one spoke. Because everyone understood that the real impact had not happened on the ground. It had happened somewhere above the clouds, when a man who thought he knew exactly who belonged finally realized he had been wrong about almost everyone. The cabin door opened to a wall of cold Chicago air and flashing camera lights. Someone had tipped off the press before the aircraft even touched the runway. Reporters stood behind the security line near the private terminal entrance, shouting questions across the wet pavement while airport police struggled to keep pathways clear. The flashes started immediately, white bursts against the dark. Naomi paused at the top of the stairs. Below her stood 2 Skyline Air Board members in heavy coats, 3 corporate attorneys, airport security officers, and a cluster of executives pretending not to panic. Ethan stopped behind her. He saw the cameras turn toward Naomi first, then toward him, and he understood instantly how this would look to the world. A black woman standing calm and composed beneath flashing lights. A white captain behind her looking like a man caught leaving a fire he started himself. Ryan exited next, carrying his flight bag tightly against his side. Claire followed more slowly. Vanessa stayed inside the aircraft for almost 30 seconds longer than everyone else. For once in her life, she did not want attention. The rain had stopped, but the runway still glistened beneath the floodlights. The air smelled like jet fuel and wet concrete. Naomi descended the stairs carefully. The cameras exploded louder. Miss Brooks, is it true the captain tried removing you from your own plane? Will the crew be terminated? Are you filing charges? Naomi kept walking, no smile, no performance. The attorneys moved beside her quickly. One of them, a gray-haired corporate lawyer named Daniel Mercer, leaned closer. We strongly recommend no public statements tonight. Naomi did not stop moving. I know what you recommend. Mercer lowered his voice further. The stock is already reacting overseas. Of course it was. Public humiliation traveled faster than aircraft. Naomi glanced back briefly at Ethan. He had frozen halfway down the stairs. The reporters saw him now. Questions shifted instantly. Captain Cole, did you discriminate against a passenger?
Did you know who she was?
Have there been previous complaints? Ethan stood completely still. For 25 years, he had walked through airports like a respected man. Tonight, he felt hunted. Not unfairly, not maliciously, just exposed. Ryan noticed Ethan's breathing becoming uneven. Claire noticed too. Naomi stopped near the bottom stair and turned around. For one brief moment, all the noise seemed to dull around them. Keep walking, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her. There was no pity in her face, but there was discipline. He understood what she meant. Do not run from this.
Walk through it.
Ethan forced his legs to move again. The reporters pressed harder against the barriers. Captain Cole, do you regret your actions? He stopped. The attorneys immediately tensed. Mercer whispered sharply to Naomi, do not let him speak. But Ethan was already looking directly at the cameras. Rainwater dripped slowly from the aircraft wing behind him. His voice came out rough, yes. The reporters fell quieter, not silent, but attentive now. Ethan swallowed. I made assumptions about someone I did not know. His jaw tightened. And I treated her with disrespect. Another burst of camera flashes lit his face. He continued before fear could stop him. I was wrong. No excuses, no legal language. Just wrong. The words landed harder because powerful people almost never said them publicly anymore. Naomi watched him carefully. Ryan did too. And for the first time that night, Ryan saw something different in his captain. Not authority, humility, small, painful, real. Mercer stepped forward immediately. That's enough for tonight. Security began guiding the press backward as the group moved toward the terminal building. Inside, the private lounge had already been cleared except for executives and legal staff. The television screens mounted above the bar played muted news coverage of the incident on repeat. One screen showed the photo of Ethan gripping Naomi's arm, again and again and again. Nobody in the room could avoid it. A young assistant quickly lowered the volume as Naomi entered. Too late. The damage was already sitting in everyone's chest. Board member Harold Bennett approached first, 72 years old, former banking executive. Expensive navy suit beneath a camel overcoat. He extended his hand cautiously toward Naomi. Naomi, we are deeply sorry. She shook his hand once. Behind him stood Angela Ruiz, another board member and former federal transportation advisor. Her expression was harder, not emotional, analytical. She looked directly at Ethan. How many complaints have involved you? Ethan answered honestly. 11 that I know of. Angela nodded slowly. And how many were addressed seriously? No answer, because everyone already knew. Harold rubbed his forehead tiredly. This company cannot survive another public scandal. Naomi finally spoke. It already survived them. The room went quiet. She looked around slowly. That's the problem. Nobody moved, because she was right. The issue was not that harm happened once. The issue was that the company learned how to absorb it quietly, settle complaints, protect valuable employees, avoid headlines. Repeat. Angela crossed her arms. So what now? Naomi removed her hoodie slowly for the first time all night, revealing a plain black sweater underneath. Nothing expensive. Nothing performative. Just practical. We investigate everything, she said calmly. Every complaint, every pattern, every employee review buried by management. Harold looked alarmed. That could expose the company legally for years. Naomi met his eyes. Then maybe the company should have feared the behavior sooner. The room fell silent again. Near the back wall, Ethan stood alone now. No uniform jacket anymore. No cockpit authority. Just a tired man in a white pilot shirt staring at the floor. Ryan walked quietly toward him. You okay? Ethan laughed once under his breath. A broken sound. No. Ryan nodded. He appreciated the honesty. Claire sat near the corner couch, holding a paper coffee cup with both hands. She looked emotionally exhausted. Vanessa remained near the windows overlooking the runway. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and family, asking what happened. For the first time in her life, she ignored social status completely, because tonight had stripped glamour out of the room. All that remained was truth. Naomi turned back toward Ethan. You asked what you would have to do. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes. The entire room watched now. Naomi stepped closer. You will attend every review hearing personally. Ethan said nothing. You will read every complaint. Still silence. You will meet employees who were ignored. Her voice sharpened slightly. And you will listen without defending yourself. Harold looked uneasy. That process could take months. Naomi nodded. Good. Ethan stared at her.
Why are you giving me this chance?
Naomi's face remained calm, but her eyes hardened, because firing you would make everyone comfortable. She paused. Learning from this might actually change something. The words hit the room differently. Not punishment, responsibility. And responsibility was heavier, far heavier. Outside the terminal windows, another aircraft crossed slowly through the dark Chicago sky. Small against the night, inside the lounge, nobody felt powerful anymore. That was the strange thing about truth. Once it entered a room, titles stopped protecting people. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. Television screens inside airport terminals played the footage on repeat. Radio hosts argued over it during morning traffic. Social media turned the image of Ethan gripping Naomi's arm into a national conversation overnight. Some people called Ethan a racist immediately. Others defended him without hesitation. He was just doing his job. She didn't look like an owner. How was he supposed to know? That last sentence appeared thousands of times online. And every time Naomi saw it, something inside her tightened. Because that was always the question underneath everything. How was he supposed to know? As if dignity should depend on recognition. As if respect needed proof. Inside Skyline Air headquarters in downtown Chicago, the atmosphere felt tense enough to crack glass. Executives moved through the halls in silence. Phones rang nonstop. Assistants whispered near elevators. Lawyers carried folders from office to office like paramedics rushing blood between operating rooms. Nobody knew what the company would look like by the end of the week. Naomi stood alone inside the executive conference room on the 40th floor, staring down at the city through towering windows, morning light spread across Lake Michigan in pale gray ribbons. Behind her, the television played muted coverage of the incident again. Same image, same arm grab, same moment. A knock came at the door. Come in. Angela Ruiz entered carrying a thick binder. Full personnel history on Ethan Cole, she said. Naomi turned. Angela placed the binder on the table with a heavy thud. 26 years with the company. Exceptional flight performance. Executive clients loved him. She paused. Human resources did not. Naomi opened the binder slowly. Inside were pages of reports, complaints, internal, notes, some formal, some buried. One handwritten statement caught her attention immediately. Passenger reported feeling humiliated after being questioned repeatedly about ticket validity despite boarding approval. Another. Customer stated Captain Cole implied she did not appear suitable for executive travel environment. Another. Staff member observed pattern of selective scrutiny toward minority passengers. Naomi closed the binder halfway, not because she doubted the pattern anymore, because seeing it documented made it harder to breathe. Angela watched her carefully. You were right, she said quietly. The behavior was protected. Naomi looked up. By who? Angela gave a tired smile without humor. By everyone who benefited from smooth operations more than uncomfortable conversations. That was the problem with institutions. People rarely needed to conspire openly. Silence did most of the work. Downstairs, Ethan sat alone in a small human resources conference room with no windows, no pilot uniform, no gold wings, no authority, just a white dress shirt wrinkled from exhaustion. A paper cup of cold coffee sat untouched in front of him. He had not slept. Every few minutes, someone outside the room glanced through the glass wall. Some curious, some angry, some disappointed. Ethan kept hearing the same sentence in his head. How was he supposed to know? At first, the question sounded defensive. Now it sounded horrifying. Because he finally understood what people meant when they asked it. They meant she did not look powerful enough to deserve respect. And that realization poisoned everything he thought he knew about himself. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Ryan stepped inside holding two folders.
You okay?
Ethan laughed quietly. No. Ryan sat across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. The building hummed around them. Phones, footsteps, elevator bells. Corporate America waking up and pretending control still existed. Ryan slid one folder across the table. What's this? Passenger complaints involving me. Ethan looked surprised. Ryan nodded slowly. 3 formal warnings. None escalated. Ethan stared at him. You? Ryan rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. One passenger said I ignored how another crew member spoke to her. He paused. She was right. Ethan looked down again. That hurt in a different way, because Ryan had learned from him, not flying behavior. The younger man leaned back in his chair.
You know what scares me most?
Ethan looked up. Ryan's voice dropped lower. I almost became exactly like you. The sentence landed hard, no anger in it, no cruelty, just truth. Ethan nodded once. You probably still can. Ryan looked away after that, because he knew Ethan was right too. Bias rarely arrived dramatically. It arrived through repetition, culture, observation. 1,000 small moments teaching people who mattered more. Upstairs, Naomi entered the employee review hearing room with Angela beside her. Around the long table sat department heads, legal advisors, and senior operations managers. Some nervous, some defensive, some already preparing excuses. Harold Bennett cleared his throat first. We need to think carefully before turning this into a public execution. Naomi took her seat calmly. This stopped being private the moment he touched me. Nobody argued. Harold adjusted his glasses. I understand emotions are high. Naomi's eyes sharpened immediately. This is not about emotions. The room fell quiet.
It is about systems.
Angela leaned forward slightly. We found complaints dating back over 12 years, she said. Most were dismissed internally without meaningful review. A younger executive shifted uncomfortably. These situations are complicated. Naomi turned toward him. No, she replied calmly. They become complicated when companies fear accountability more than harm. The executive looked down. Another board member spoke carefully.
What exactly are you proposing?
Naomi folded her hands together. A complete external investigation, mandatory review panels, bias training tied to promotion eligibility. Her voice hardened slightly, and direct accountability for leadership failures. Harold looked alarmed. That could expose every weakness we have. Naomi met his eyes without blinking. Then perhaps the weaknesses deserve exposure. Silence spread across the room again. Outside the conference windows, Chicago traffic crawled through the morning streets below. Tiny cars, tiny people, thousands of strangers moving through another ordinary day, carrying invisible judgments they barely understood themselves. Naomi thought about her mother again, cleaning airport floors overnight while wealthy travelers walked past without seeing her, and she realized something painful. Most people did not become cruel because they enjoyed cruelty. They became cruel because they stopped noticing other people entirely. Downstairs, Ethan stood alone in the restroom, staring at himself in the mirror. The fluorescent lighting made him look older, tired, human. For years, he believed professionalism meant emotional distance, control, authority. Now he wondered if he had simply spent decades hiding behind a uniform because he was afraid to examine the man underneath it. A janitor entered quietly, pushing a cleaning cart. Older black man, maybe late 60s. Ethan stepped aside automatically. The janitor nodded politely.
Morning.
Ethan looked at the name stitched onto the man's work shirt. Leonard. Simple moment. Ordinary moment. But something inside Ethan cracked unexpectedly, because 6 months ago, maybe even 6 days ago, he probably would not have looked at Leonard long enough to remember his name. And suddenly that realization felt unbearable. Ethan almost walked past Leonard without saying anything. Habit pulled him forward. Shame stopped him. The restroom was quiet except for the soft squeak of the mop wheels and the low buzz of fluorescence lights overhead. Leonard moved with steady practiced motions, the kind of rhythm that came from years of doing hard work while most people looked through him. Ethan stood by the sink longer than necessary. Leonard glanced up. "You need something, sir?" That word struck Ethan in the chest. Sir. Respect given automatically to a man who had not earned it from him. Ethan turned fully.
Your name is Leonard?
The older man looked mildly surprised. Yes, sir. Ethan shook his head. Ethan is fine. Leonard paused with one hand on the mop handle. He studied Ethan's face for a second, probably recognizing him from the news already. Everyone in the building had seen it by now. You're the captain, Leonard said. Ethan nodded. I am. Leonard did not smile. He did not accuse him either. That somehow made it harder. Ethan looked toward the mirror, then back at Leonard. I owe you an apology. Leonard's eyebrows lifted slightly.
To me?
To people I've treated like background. Ethan swallowed, and I don't even know how many that includes. Leonard leaned on the mop handle. For a moment, his eyes held no anger, only fatigue. Captain, men like you apologize when the cameras get hot. Ethan took the hit without flinching.
You're right.
Leonard seemed surprised by that. Ethan continued. I don't know yet if this is real change or fear. I'm trying to find out. The restroom fell still. From somewhere outside, a phone rang. Footsteps passed the door. Life kept moving around them like nothing important was happening inside a small corporate bathroom. But something was. Leonard looked down at his hands. I've worked in this building 9 years, he said. Most executives don't know my name. They know when the trash isn't empty. They know when the floor is wet. They know when the coffee spills.
But me?
He shook his head.
Invisible.
Ethan felt his throat tighten. Leonard lifted his eyes. You want to change? Start there. Learn people's names when they can't do anything for you. The words were simple. No theory, no corporate language.
Just truth.
Ethan nodded. I will. Leonard studied him one more time, then went back to mopping. That's a start, he said. Upstairs, Naomi sat at the head of the conference table while the board argued in circles. Legal risk, brand damage, investor confidence, public messaging, all clean phrases for messy fear. Harold Bennett kept tapping his pen against a yellow legal pad. We need one clear public statement, he said. something that acknowledges concern without admitting legal liability. Angela Ruiz turned toward him slowly. Harold, a photograph of our senior captain grabbing the new owner by the arm is already national news. Harold's jaw tightened. I'm aware. Then stop pretending this is a wording issue. The room went quiet. Naomi watched them all. These were intelligent people, educated people, powerful people, and yet most of them still wanted the same thing Ethan wanted at first: relief without recognition. She leaned forward. No statement goes out until we decide what kind of company we are becoming. A younger board member named Caleb Wright frowned. With respect, Naomi, companies do not transform overnight. No, Naomi said, but they reveal themselves in minutes. Nobody answered. Caleb looked down at the table. Naomi opened the binder again and slid several printed complaints into the center. These are not public yet, but they could be. Each one represents a person who trusted this company enough to pay us and left feeling smaller than when they arrived. Angela picked up one page. Her expression tightened as she read. Claire Benson knocked lightly at the door before stepping in. She changed out of her flight jacket. Without the polished uniform, she looked smaller, more human. Miss Brooks, she said, you asked for any crew member who wanted to speak. Naomi nodded. Come in, Claire. Every executive turned toward her. Claire froze at the attention. For years, she had served rooms like this from the edges: coffee, water, smiles, never testimony. Her fingers twisted together. Naomi's voice softened. You don't have to perform.
Just tell the truth.
Claire breathed in slowly. I've worked skyline cabins for 28 years, she began. I've seen good service. I've also seen things we all pretended were good service. Harold shifted. Claire's eyes moved to him. Certain passengers were treated like royalty before they opened their mouths. Others had to prove they deserved a glass of water. The words were quiet, but they cut clean. Angela nodded for her to continue. Claire swallowed. I stayed quiet because I needed the work. My husband died 8 years ago. I had medical bills.
A mortgage.
I told myself silence was survival. Her voice trembled now. But last night when Captain Cole grabbed Miss Brooks, I saw her face. Claire looked at Naomi, then down. And I knew she was staying calm because she had to, not because it didn't hurt. Naomi's expression remained controlled, but her eyes softened slightly. Claire continued. I have watched passengers do that for years. Smile through insult. Apologize when they were the ones being mistreated. Make themselves smaller so the flight could stay comfortable for everyone else. The room sat frozen. No one interrupted, not even Harold. Claire looked around the table, and I helped make that comfort possible. Silence. Then Naomi asked the question gently.
What do you need from this company?
Claire blinked. She had expected blame, not that. I need protection for people who speak up, she said. Real protection, not a poster in the break room. Not an online module everyone clicks through while eating lunch. I mean, if a captain humiliates someone and a flight attendant reports it, that flight attendant should not lose shifts for being difficult. Angela wrote that down immediately. Claire kept going, gaining strength, and passengers need somewhere to report harm without proving they were perfect victims. People get nervous, angry, emotional. That does not mean they deserved what happened. Naomi nodded slowly. There it is, she said. Harold looked confused. What? Naomi turned toward him. The culture we need to build. Downstairs, Ethan stepped out of the restroom and found Ryan waiting near the hallway. Ryan studied him.
You look different.
Ethan gave a tired laugh. I feel like someone peeled my skin off. Ryan nodded. That sounds about right. They began walking toward the elevator together. For the first time, they did not walk like captain and first officer. They walked like two men who had both been frightened by their own reflection. The elevator doors opened. Inside stood Vanessa Sinclair. Her makeup was still perfect, but her eyes were red. She had been crying. None of them mentioned it. For a few seconds, they stood together in the small mirrored elevator. A captain, a co-pilot, a billionaire heiress, all stripped of certainty. Vanessa finally spoke without looking at them. I called my father. Ethan looked forward, and she swallowed. He told me to deny everything. Her voice cracked. He said people like Naomi are dangerous because they use race to take power. Ryan's jaw tightened. Ethan closed his eyes. Vanessa looked at their reflections in the elevator doors. I think maybe people like my father are dangerous because they already have power and never question how they use it. The elevator continued rising, quiet, steady. And in that small steel box above Chicago, three people who had spent their lives protected by different kinds of privilege began to understand that being uncomfortable was not the same as being harmed. It was only the beginning of learning. 3 weeks later, Ethan walked into the training center wearing no captain stripes for the first time in 26 years, no gold wings, no authority, no protected status, just a plain navy polo shirt with a temporary employee badge clipped near his chest. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while employees moved past him, pretending not to stare. But they stared. Some recognized him from the news, some from the company, some from the photograph. The arm grab had become famous. Ethan felt it everywhere now, in elevators, in silence, in people avoiding his eyes. And for once, he did not blame them. A sign outside conference room B read Mandatory Passenger Dignity Review Session. The wording made him uncomfortable. Good, Naomi thought when she approved it. Growth rarely began in comfort. Inside the room sat 12 employees from different departments, flight attendants, pilots, ground crew, customer service agents, no executives. That mattered. Naomi wanted leadership to stop hiding behind titles and start listening to the people closest to harm. Ryan sat near the back beside Claire. Vanessa sat quietly along the wall in a dark sweater and no makeup. She looked less like a socialite now and more like a woman trying to understand herself. At the front stood Dr. Evelyn Carter, a behavioral psychologist hired to lead the sessions. She was in her 60s, calm voice, steel in her posture, the kind of woman who did not waste words. Ethan entered slowly. Every conversation stopped. Dr. Carter gestured toward an empty chair in the center of the room. Sit there, not beside everyone, in front of them. Ethan obeyed. The chair felt exposed under the bright lights. Dr. Carter folded her hands. Today is not about punishment, she said. It is about recognition. Ethan almost smiled bitterly at the word. Recognition again. That word seemed to follow him now like a shadow. Dr. Carter looked around the room. Captain Cole spent decades being rewarded for confidence. Today he practices something else. Her eyes shifted toward Ethan, listening. Nobody spoke immediately. Claire broke first. I used to think professionalism meant making powerful people comfortable, she said quietly. Now I think maybe professionalism means protecting dignity even when it costs something. Dr. Carter nodded once. Ryan leaned forward slightly. I keep replaying that night in my head, he admitted. And what bothers me most is that I saw the problem before it exploded. He looked at Ethan. I just decided staying quiet was safer. Ethan lowered his eyes. Ryan continued. That's how culture works. Not through monsters, through normal people avoiding tension. The room fell silent. Dr. Carter let the silence breathe. She understood something most corporate trainers did not. People change slower when rushed. A customer service representative named Monica spoke next. Black woman, mid-40s, sharp eyes. I worked first-class support for 13 years, she said. You know how many times passengers asked me if I actually worked there? Nobody answered. Monica gave a humorless laugh, enough that I stopped noticing. That line hit Naomi hard from the back of the room, because numbness was its own kind of wound. Monica looked directly at Ethan. The dangerous part is not one bad moment. The dangerous part is what people learn to survive repeatedly. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that now. Monica's face stayed still. No, you're beginning to. Another clean hit. No cruelty.
Just truth.
Ethan accepted it. Dr. Carter stepped toward the center. Captain Cole, she said, tell the room what you thought when you first saw Naomi Brooks. The room grew tighter instantly. Ethan inhaled slowly. Every instinct inside him wanted softer language, professional concern, operational caution, security awareness. But Naomi had already destroyed those hiding places weeks ago, so Ethan answered honestly. I thought she didn't belong there. Nobody moved. Dr. Carter kept her eyes on him. Why? Ethan's throat tightened. Because she didn't match the image in my head of who wealthy passengers were supposed to look like. The room stayed quiet. No dramatic reactions, no shouting. Just people hearing a truth they already understood too well. Dr. Carter nodded. And where did that image come from? Ethan looked down at his hands everywhere. The answer surprised even him. My industry, television, clients, executives, other pilots, myself. Dr. Carter stepped closer, and what made it dangerous? Ethan finally looked up because I stopped seeing people individually. The psychologist nodded once. There it is. Not hatred, reduction. Turning human beings into categories so quickly that dignity disappeared before conversation even began. Naomi watched Ethan carefully. For the first time since the incident, she believed he might actually be confronting himself instead of defending himself. That mattered, not for his reputation, for the people he would encounter if he ever carried authority again. Vanessa suddenly spoke from the wall. My father called me weak for attending this. Heads turned toward her. She swallowed hard but continued. He said rich people survive by protecting status. Her eyes shifted toward Naomi. But honestly, I think people like us survive by staying disconnected from consequences. The room absorbed that quietly. Claire looked at Vanessa with unexpected softness, because accountability sounded different when spoken without performance. Dr. Carter moved toward a whiteboard and wrote a sentence slowly across it. People do not always reveal themselves through hatred. Sometimes they reveal themselves through assumption. She underlined the last word, assumption. Then she turned toward Ethan. What did Naomi Brooks lose in that moment on the plane? Ethan answered immediately. Nothing. She owned the company. Dr. Carter's stare sharpened. No. The room tightened again. Ethan realized his mistake instantly. He leaned back slightly, then answered again. She lost safety. Dr. Carter nodded once. And dignity. Ethan's face changed, because suddenly he understood why the reveal mattered less than the humiliation before it. Naomi should never have needed power to deserve respect. That was the entire point. The room remained silent for several seconds. Heavy silence. Honest silence. Then Naomi finally stood from the back wall and stepped forward slowly. Everyone watched her. Ethan looked up carefully. Naomi stopped in front of him. When people saw the headlines, she said quietly, they focused on the irony. Ethan listened. Billionaire owner mistaken for unwanted passenger. She shook her head slightly. But that was never the real story. The room stayed perfectly still. Naomi's eyes locked onto his. The real story is that you believe humiliation was acceptable until status interrupted it. The sentence landed like a hammer. Nobody spoke after that, because every person in the room understood how often the world worked exactly that way. 6 months later, Ethan Cole stood at Gate 14 inside Logan International Airport, holding a cup of burnt terminal coffee and watching passengers board a morning flight to Seattle. No private jet, no executive lounge, no special treatment, just a regular commercial gate filled with tired travelers, rolling suitcases, crying children, and people trying to make it through another long day. The airport smelled like rainwater, coffee, and recycled air. A cleaning crew moved quietly along the windows, while flight attendants checked boarding groups near the gate scanner. Ethan wore his Skyline Air uniform again, but not the same way. The gold stripes had returned to his sleeves after months of review panels, retraining, probation hearings, and public accountability sessions. The company had not restored his position quietly either. Naomi made sure of that. Every passenger complaint process had changed. Every promotion review now included conduct evaluations. Anonymous reporting system protected crew members who spoke up. Flight staff attended live dignity workshops instead of clicking through meaningless online videos. The company lost money. Some executives resigned. Several investors complained. Naomi did not care. Because for the first time in years, employees started telling the truth without fear. That mattered more. Ethan took a slow sip of coffee as passengers continued boarding. An elderly black woman wearing a faded blue sweatshirt approached the counter, carrying an overstuffed canvas bag and a worn paper ticket folder. The gate agent barely looked at her. "Mom, boarding for economy starts later." The woman smiled politely. "I know, baby, I'm in first class." The gate agent finally looked up, a tiny pause, almost invisible, but Ethan saw it immediately now. That tiny flicker people thought nobody noticed. That split second where judgment arrived before humanity. The younger version of Ethan would have ignored it. The older version could not. He walked toward the counter calmly. "Morning, Miss Jenkins," he said warmly after glancing at her boarding pass. We're happy to have you with us today. The woman looked surprised, then relieved, real relief. The kind people carry when they spent years preparing themselves to be doubted. The gate agent stiffened slightly. Ethan looked at her gently, not cruelly. She's seated in 2A. The employee nodded quickly. Yes, Captain, sorry. Miss Jenkins smiled awkwardly. It's all right. Folks make mistakes. Ethan's chest tightened at the sentence, because he understood now how often people said that just to survive the moment peacefully. He picked up her bag before she could protest. Let me help you. As they walked down the jet bridge together, Miss Jenkins looked up at him carefully. You seem different from most pilots. Ethan gave a quiet laugh. I used to think being respected was the most important part of this job. She adjusted her glasses.
And now?
Ethan glanced toward the aircraft doorway ahead. Now I think making people feel safe matters more. The woman smiled softly. That's a better way to live. Inside the aircraft, sunlight spilled through the windows in pale gold lines across the seats. Flight attendants greeted passengers with practiced smiles while luggage bins slammed shut overhead. Normal sounds, ordinary morning. But Ethan no longer trusted ordinary moments, because ordinary moments were where dignity lived or died. Claire Benson stood near the front galley, reviewing the passenger manifest. She looked up and smiled when she saw Ethan helping Miss Jenkins into seat 2A. A real smile this time. Not forced professionalism, not survival. Respect. Ryan entered the cockpit carrying his headset bag.
You're getting soft, Captain.
Ethan smirked faintly. Took me long enough. Ryan leaned against the cockpit doorway. You know the video from that night passed 20 million views yesterday. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The image still haunted him. His hand on Naomi's arm, her calm face. The silence. Some nights he still woke up thinking about it, not because of public shame, because he understood now how small he had made another human being feel. Ryan's voice softened. You changed, though. Ethan looked across the cabin. Passengers settling in. Different races, different ages, different clothes, different lives, all carrying invisible stories nobody else could see. Changing is not something you finish, Ethan said quietly. Ryan nodded slowly. That answer sounded honest. Near the boarding door, a young man in construction boots hesitated before entering first class. His jacket was dusty, his hands rough from labor. Ethan noticed the uncertainty immediately. That look again. The silent question people carried when they expected to be challenged. Ethan stepped forward before the young man could retreat into embarrassment.
You're in the right place,
He said warmly. The passenger blinked in surprise, then smiled. Small moment, tiny moment. But Naomi had been right. Culture changed through moments exactly like that. Not speeches, not slogans, choices. Later that afternoon, Naomi Brooks watched flight status monitor from her office in Chicago as Ethan's aircraft landed safely in Seattle. On her desk sat a framed photo of her mother wearing an airport cleaning uniform from almost 30 years earlier. Tired eyes, gentle smile, proud posture. Naomi touched the corner of the frame softly. Her mother never lived long enough to see her daughter own an airline, but maybe she would have appreciated something even more. A company finally learning to see people before status. Outside Naomi's office window, the city moved through another ordinary day. Traffic lights changed. Pedestrians crossed streets. Strangers passed each other carrying invisible burdens no one else fully understood. That was the lesson beneath everything. Power was not revealed by wealth, or titles, or private jets. Real character appeared in smaller moments. The pause before judgment, the choice to listen, the decision to treat someone with dignity before knowing what they could do for you. Ethan learned that too late to erase the harm he caused, but not too late to become someone different. And sometimes, in America, that is where healing begins. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about dignity, justice, and second chances. And if you believe respect should never depend on status, comment these 3 words below. Humanity comes first.